Hey, what's ready? Welcome back to News Dose. And to kick off the week, we actually got a big report for the next generation Xbox. Yeah, this has quickly become the worst kept secret in the industry because basically everything is leaking out by this point. So we're going to get all of its latest information, which includes consoles as in plural. Yeah, stick around for all of that, and then also an upcoming PlayStation Direct and why fans are already hyping it up. First, though, I do want to thank my supporters on Patreon and on YouTube memberships. Thank you just so much for what you do, and you will receive this video through early access. Let's go and get right into things, though, starting off with Yakuza Kiwami 3, and this is a game that I'm actually looking very much forward to. I'm a huge fan of the series, and I'd like to see them remake at least 0 through 6. So the fact that they're finally doing that for the third entry, or I guess technically the fourth installment chronologically, is really cool to see. However, its reviews are currently rolling in, and right now it is one of the lowest reviewed Yakuza titles with a 75 overall score, which might surprise some people because here recently the Yakuza franchise has been just firing on all cylinders, but if you look at reviews for Kiwami 3, you'll notice that most of its reviews sits right at that 80 overall score mark, with a few reviews that drags it down because they are very harsh on it. Some critics have heavily criticized some of its changes, so maybe that's something to look into if you played the original title. For the most part, though, from what I've gathered, it seems like if you like the Yakuza series, then you'll probably enjoy Kiwami 3, but it's not necessarily a remake that's going to change its status in the grand scheme of things. Oh, and we got another leak for Starfield on the PlayStation 5. This has been in the rumor mill for a very, very long time, and quite honestly, I'd be a bit surprised if this doesn't eventually happen, especially now that Xbox has this new stance for their multi-platform games. I think really this is just a matter of when rather than if by this point. But what's happening here is that Shinobi on Resetera revealed that according to his information, Starfield will reveal its new expansion next month alongside a PlayStation 5 announcement. So yeah, we're talking about a March announcement, and this is really interesting because we've also been hearing about a potential April release date. So the turnaround time could potentially be fairly quick, which does align with what Todd Howard recently said about how he likes to announce games just ahead of their release. So I think this is actually very realistic when you start to think about it, though I will, however, be very interested in its reception from specific people online. And the reason I say that is because when it first launched on Xbox back in, I want to say 2023, there was a very obvious hate campaign against it. Honestly, I don't think I've ever seen more ridiculous discourse leading up to a game's launch. And that was the thing, because a lot of the discourse came specifically from PlayStation dominant fans. So if those same fans turn around and praise the PlayStation 5 announcement, and I'm talking about social media influencers specifically, you know who I'm talking about, but I think that will be very telling. Nonetheless, though, the way I view Starfield is that it's a good game if you like Bethesda RPGs. I do prefer both The Elder Scrolls and Fallout over Starfield, but I still had a good time playing Starfield, and I would recommend it to fans that like Bethesda RPGs specifically. It has a lot of similarities, albeit it can be flawed at times. Now, we also got yet another leak for Pokemon Generation 10. By all indication, it seems like Generation 10, aka Wind and Wave, is planned for 2026, and it could potentially get its first official reveal this month on Pokemon Day, which is on the 27th for those that don't know. Now, however, I do want to spread at least some caution for that reveal. I almost expect it to be a teaser trailer rather than a full gameplay reveal, and the reason I say that is because that's how they've approached their last few games, including both Legends of ZA and Scarlet and Violet. Both of those games did get a teaser trailer before a full-blown gameplay reveal. So all I'm trying to say is that if you want a gameplay reveal, it might end up happening later in the year rather than this month. Who knows? It could be a Pokemon Day, but I just don't want anybody to go in and leave disappointed if it's only a teaser trailer. However, what I will say is that some of its images leaked out online, and while I can't include those images on my channel for copyright-related reasons, what I can do is to direct you to a search engine, something like Google or Bing, and you can simply type in, let's just say, Pokemon Generation 10 images leak, and who knows, maybe, just maybe, something interesting will pop up. I'm just throwing that out there. But yeah, based on these leaked images that I can at least talk about, the first thing to keep in mind is that this is a game that's in active development. So it's incomplete, it's a work in progress, but even still, it somehow still manages to look a lot better than Scarlet and Violet. And if I had to attach any word to it, I would describe it as ambitious. I mean, there's even an underwater section, which I'd say is really cool in this case. I mean, we've been able to do that in some of the old games, but either which way, I think it's shaping up incredibly well, and it seems like there will be a big jump graphically from the Switch 1 generation. All right, now speaking of next generation, though, I mean, we might as well just go and talk about the most leaked console of the past few years being the next generation Xbox. I mean, by this point, it's all but announced. But what's happening here is that Jez Corden dropped some exclusive details for what he's heard about the next Xbox. Now, right away, some of the stuff that he mentioned we have been talking about on the channel since back in 2024. So just to reiterate on some of those topics, yet again, it is a console PC hybrid with a Windows slant to it. We have heard that time and time again. And according to Jez, it actually has the full Windows as its backend, and that basically means that when you boot into it, it's going to launch directly into an Xbox OS. Think of something like the Steam Deck, but instead of Linux as its backend, it will be Windows. Now, if you've been paying attention, this is something that Xbox has been toying around with. That's one of the big reasons that they partnered up with ROG. I've been saying for a long time that the Xbox Ally is a glimpse into their future because they're using the Xbox Ally as a prototype for how they want their next console to work. They want to perfect the Xbox OS and make sure that Windows is not a problem on the back end. They want to make sure it feels like a console experience when you boot into it. Now, Jez also mentioned that it will have backwards compatibility that goes all the way back to the original Xbox, which is absolutely massive news if true. I mean, you have to realize that while the Xbox Series already has that capability, PC does not. So this has actually been one of my biggest questions in terms of their PC hybrid strategy. So that is a very, very welcome update. And he also mentioned partner OEM devices. Again, we've talked about this before. Xbox will have their own first-party console, but the idea of OEM partner devices will basically allow them to target all kinds of different price points and different power levels. So let's just hypothetically say that Xbox comes out with this ultra premium $1,000 plus option. Well, ROG could then also come out with their own variant at, let's say, $700, which would be a lot more budget friendly. Now, I just threw out some random numbers, but the idea is that Xbox won't be stuck with just one single model, and it could actually evolve much quicker than what we see from a typical console generation. You know, when Sony launches the PlayStation 6, it's likely going to be the PS6 and the PS6 Pro for the next, 8 to 10 years. But Xbox could have an endless amount of different models year to year with all kinds of different power points. That is their strategy with this OEM plan. This is their end game, if you will. Now, there's two things that he mentioned, though, that stood out to me as new information, one of which is its release date. Last week, AMD's CEO seemingly pointed to 2027 as a release window for the next generation Xbox. But according to Jez, Xbox insiders were surprised by that announcement, and that's because 2027 seems to be a best-case scenario. Reportedly, Xbox is not 100% committed to 2027 as a definitive window because they want to be 100% sure that the console experience is completely polished and fits into what console gamers expect. So in other words, it could potentially release in 2027, yes, but that's definitely not a foregone conclusion. Now, the one other thing that he mentioned is that despite some of the rumors, Xbox actually still has plans for a first-party Xbox handheld. However, it's just not their main priority at this exact moment. Their main focus right now is for their next generation console, but there is very much a future where we could eventually see a first-party handheld from them as well. So yeah, Xbox has a lot going on with their next generation plans and just for Xbox hardware. And if anything, I think some of their ideas are actually very exciting. I mean, I understand the sentiment that they're going away from exclusives and, that gives gamers less reason to buy into the next generation Xbox. But at the same time, it will be backwards compatible. It'll have the entire Xbox library ready to go, and it'll also have storefronts like Steam, which also, yes, plays PlayStation games, or at least some PlayStation games. So I think that's a strong selling point that could actually speak to a lot of people. Let me know what you all think about all of this, though, in the comments below. Now, one last thing before we go, though, because Sony just announced the next PlayStation State of Play, which is officially set for February 12th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And the thing is that unlike a lot of other State of Plays, I do think there is a reason to be excited about this one specifically, and that's because it's an hour long, which is actually the longest State of Play of all time. It'll also have a mix of first-party games and third-party games. So on paper, it seems like they are treating this as a big-time showcase, rather than just being a small State of Play like we usually get. Now, with that said, I will point out that State of Play events do historically leave a lot of people underwhelmed. So that is something to keep in the back of your mind. In fact, there's already a lot of rumors about a reveal for Final Fantasy VII Part 3 and Wolverine, which I'm not going to rule those rumors out. Frankly, I could see both of those reveals being there. I think that those are realistic. But my point is that the hype train is already ramping up, and that's what causes a lot of gamers to end up leaving disappointed. They start to buy into rumors that just don't end up happening. So my suggestion is to at least be cautious for who you believe over the next few days. Again, always keep in mind that State of Plays do tend to be on the smaller side of things. That's not necessarily a guarantee, but it's still nice to have in the back of your mind just in case not everything meets your expectations. Now, with that said, when it comes to their first-party games, which I know is going to be the main conversation this week for a lot of people, I think the easy predictions to make is for Wolverine and Saros. I mean, that's Sony's two big games of the year, or at least the ones that we know of. Now, they could also show some of their live service games, games like Fair Games or even Marathon. Those could be potential first-party announcements. I'd like to think that there would be a surprise like the God of War side-scroller, but again, I'm not quite convinced of that. But let me know what you all think about all this in the comments below. Let me hear some of your predictions. In the meantime, if we do learn more, of course, I'll keep you all updated. Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this episode, but until next time, make sure to subscribe, ring that bell, and peace out.